Hey, music fans, there are some great concerts headed this way. Don't miss out on all the shows in your favorite venues like Deftones at Madison Square Garden, Eagles at the Sphere, and Foster the People at the Ryman Auditorium. Tickets are going fast, so don't wait. Head to livenation.com to get your tickets now. That's livenation.com.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. What's your perfect night? Is it curling up on the couch for a cozy, peaceful night in? Therapy can feel a bit like that, your comfort place where you replenish your energy. With BetterHelp, get matched with a therapist based on your needs, entirely online. It's convenient and suited to your schedule. Find comfort this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com to learn more and save 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's LIBSYN, ads.com today.
Have you ever met a pilot that is not passionate about flying? I haven't. My experience is all pilots are passionate about flying. Now, have you ever met an animal person who is not passionate about animals? I haven't. My experience is all animals are passionate about animals too. In today's episode, Michael Schneider, he's the founder of Pilots to the Rescue. He joins me. He's a pilot and an animal lover. Now, he took his passions about both and created something where he could put his passions to work and do it for something that's really good. His organization is doing amazing things. They're saving animals from being euthanized in shelters that are overflowing and taking them to other shelters to help our furry friends find home. It's this perfect scenario in an unperfect world. Now we get into how he found his purpose and how Pilots to the Rescue is making a positive difference. Now here's one example. If you've never been through a natural disaster, think about this. Your home is flooding and you've got to get your family to safety. But you can't find your pet. It's a dilemma. What do? They've gotten scared and they've ran off and you can't find them and you have no choice but to go. Now you have to get your family to safety and you desperately want to find your pet. But afterwards, the roads are closed. Now this happens all the time. The animals are found by emergency personnel and then they're put in shelters that are overflowing and the shelters are in a dilemma too. So, because airports are generally the first to open, Michael is able to fly in and get the animals to safety in other shelters. Today's episode is one that'll take your heads out of the clouds and put your pets back in the clouds. It's a remarkable story of how to take your passions and put them to good use. I know you're going to love Michael's story as he takes us to a place where the sky is the limit.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. Today I have a really great guest. There's a lot of reasons I was excited about today. He is actually the top dog at Pilots to the Rescue, Michael Schneider. Michael, thanks so much for being on, and I'm excited to get into your story.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Very excited to be on with you today.
Well, I know it's right around holiday times and all that, but I was looking and seeing you guys are doing a lot of stuff. But before we get into that, I want to get back into your background, how you created the business, your passions and all that. So let's just, start at the beginning and move forward till today. So let's get into it.
All right, the history of Pilots to the Rescue. I
Yeah.
started it in 2015 to combine my love of aviation and rescuing animals. Ever since I was a little kid, I always had an affinity towards animals. My parents always took me to the local SPCA, and we picked out the dog or cat. And I didn't even know that you could purchase an animal till much later in life. I just thought that's the way you got your dog or your cat. You go to the local pound. And then, to my parents' dismay, I would bring in all the injured animals outside the home, like the bird with the injured wing, mice. I kept gerbils and hamsters, you name it. And then I was an entrepreneur at a very young age, and I started a pet sitting business. So I would go to the local houses in the neighborhood, and they entrusted me with walking their dog or feeding their cat. And even my neighbor had a fenced-in pen that he wasn't using, and I would sometimes put some dogs in there. So, yeah, always had a liking to animals. Felt a connection with them as a young child. The aviation part came from skydiving. I was living in Cincinnati at the time. This is going back over 10 years ago. I sold a business in 2008 during that financial crisis, and I moved to Cincinnati from New York to work for the new owners as part of the contract. And a woman I was dating at the time asked me if I wanted to go skydiving for my birthday, and had never been before, and that sounded really exciting. And for anybody listening, I highly recommend that you just take the plunge and go skydiving, because your life will never be the same.
It won't. I've done it.
Yeah, and basically, I was just really enamored by all the vibrations and the sound. I mean, when you go skydiving, you're pretty much sitting on the floor of a small plane with its seats taken out,
Right.
and there's usually one pilot up there, and you get to see all the instrumentation. You don't really get that feeling of aviation today in a big commercial jet, especially after 9/11. I mean, maybe you could see the cockpit or the flight deck when you're boarding the plane, but that's about it. You see the pilot in the beginning and the end. So this was an amazing experience for me. And one of the pilots, I think it was my third jump in Miami, encouraged me to take a discovery flight. And these you can find at any small airports across the country. Probably costs about $200-300 today, and the instructor takes you up. They do the takeoff and landing, but you get to experience what it's like to fly, which is an amazing experience.
Hold on one second. I just want to interject a couple things. One is discovery flight for you guys listening is the discovery if you want to learn how to flying, not just to go flying around. It's actually to see what it's like to fly a plane, just as an FYI.
Yes, you're correct.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I was hooked. Just took one flight. I signed up for lessons immediately, and it took me a while to get my license. I mean, I think the national average is like 1 year and 60 hours. I think it ended up taking me 2 years and 100 hours. Everybody's life situation is different. I was traveling a lot, but
Sure.
I got my private pilot's license, and I moved back to New York. And I wanted to give back with this amazing license that I got, that I worked so hard to achieve. And I heard about people transporting like medical cases, like people that were sick and couldn't afford treatment locally. So they would private pilots would fly them to a facility that agreed to treat them pro bono. And then I heard about a group that was transporting animals to escape euthanasia, and that was really interesting to me because of my liking of animals and my connection with animals. So I did a couple missions with another organization, and being the serial entrepreneur that I am, and having the desire to fly an aircraft that you really can't rent. Most of these aircraft that we learn to fly in and that you're able to rent are 4-passenger. They're really small.
Right.
And then, the rental fleets, they don't really want their planes smelling like animals.
Yeah, exactly.
So in 2015, I started a fundraiser. I wanted to raise $10,000 in 48 hours, and I basically just shared my passion, my desire to start this organization with all my friends and family, and they all stepped up. I raised about $12,000, and I signed up for my nonprofit status, the 501c3, the website, all that stuff. That was my seed money. So that's the history.
Well, here I have I want to interject several things. One is that your family, first off, were way ahead of the curve in the rescue thing, because back in the day, not a lot of people rescue dogs. And the fact that you guys are doing it, I mean, today pretty much it's a big deal now, more than it was back in the day when your parents were doing that, which is pretty impressive. But even more impressive is you starting a pet sitting business, which of course now there's all the different companies that have it. You can sign up in the apps and that. Where everybody else was cutting grass, you were taking care of animals, which I think is really cool too.
That's an interesting distinction. I didn't think of it that way. You're right. You're right. It's
No, it's unique. It really is. So you pretty much run the path and you even know it, which I think is really cool. One thing about so one is for you guys listening, I'm a private pilot as well, so I know a little bit about what Michael's talking about. But I also went skydiving. But here's a funny story. So I had gone skydiving 2 or 3 times. I was going to ask you, when you went were you jumping out like of a Cessna where you had to grab onto the spar on the side, or what were you doing?
I didn't do the static line. I did the actual free fall. I know that I've jumped out of a Cessna. I don't remember. It was probably a 182, because they want to get up there a little faster. I also went inside a plane that was purpose built for skydiving. I believe they're out of New Zealand. It's pretty cool. It's got a bench.
Oh wow!
And down the center. I don't know the name of the plane, but it was purpose driven for skydiving operations, and that was a much better experience because it was a turboprop like the plane we have now. So
right,
it's a lot better at getting up there quickly. But
one last thing on the skydiving, we'll get back to what you're doing, is that, so I had done it a few times, and my youngest daughter goes to me, she says, "Hey, Dad, I want to go skydiving." I'm going, wait a minute there. As a parent, it scared the hell out of me. And I think you have to be, I can't remember, I think you have to be 16 is the minimum age. It's either 16 or 18, I can't remember. And for her birthday, whatever age that is, she wanted to go. And I go, well, if you're going, I'm going too.
Nice.
So it was a tandem jump deal. And so I said, well, I'm going first. So I go, and for her, she was all excited about doing it. And she said it was the weirdest experience because on those tandem ones, you kind of hang on the outside and then you just go, you roll out. She said it happened so fast it freaked her out seeing me go. The whole time, though, I'm more paranoid about her even than the jumping thing. My whole deal was, if I'm going first and if something happens, I'm going to catch you when you're coming down. But it was one of those weird things. But anyways, let's get back to your story. So
sure.
Skydiving to flying, which is the opposite. Well, actually, you know what? I did go skydiving before I got my pilot license as well, but it's kind of a different transition. But let's get back to your story. Nobody wants to hear my story anyways, but let's hear your story and just go from there. So you do this pet sitting. Now you've heard about people doing that, which I think is amazing that you've got a passion for. And I love the fact that you've combined 2 passions to do what you're doing. But let's get back to your story and go from there.
Yeah, sure. So raised the money, started the organization, and the first plane we bought was a 1977 Piper Lance. It's like a
Sure
family SUV in the sky, 6-seater. The seats came out, flexible cabin. So we started to do some volume, and
well, wait, pause there for a second in the volume. So I want to go back a little bit. I want to take it a little bit slower because I've got questions. So
sure.
When I was on your website, you found out about some puppies that were going to be euthanized in an overbuilt shelter. So first question, and I want to hear that story. How did you find out? Because you were in New York and it was down in, if I remember correctly, in North Carolina. How did you find out about that? And then how did you put all the pieces of the puzzle together?
Yeah, so that rescue was with the other organization. I had mentioned that I started doing some trips with called Pilot PAW that is still around.
Okay.
And they provide a transport board, like a do-it-yourself transport board. And, pilots can go on there and claim missions and stuff like that. So I heard about this litter of ditch puppies that came from Wilson County in North Carolina. And as disheartening as it sounds, that's exactly what happened. Someone had puppies. A lot of people like to witness the miracle of birth, and then they hope to sell them.
Right.
These sort of backyard breeders. And then they realize they can't sell them for whatever reason, and then they just threw them in the side of a ditch on the side of the road. So they were discovered by Wilson County Animal Control, and because nobody down there wanted to adopt them, they have to get them out to make, it's a vicious cycle of making room in their overcrowded facility.
Right.
Nobody likes euthanizing pets.
Of course.
it's unfortunate that it happens, but the more transport we can do, the more space they have for bringing in other animals. So we flew from North Carolina. We ended up dropping those off in Connecticut, and they were all adopted out to loving homes. And that's essentially what we're doing. And it's far less stress to do it with an airplane than ground transport, even though we also do ground transport, by the way.
So I get, and I know it was with the other organization, and I'm going to get to yours, but how do you find out? I mean, is there like a network or something that talks about, hey, we're a shelter, we're overflow, and we're going to have to start doing euthanizing. We really need to, I'm assuming they're more trying to get them to be adopted, but how do you find out about it?
We have partners we've been working with for nearly a decade
Uh-huh.
that know of the services that we provide, and then we entertain new ones from time to time. The difficulty with new working with new origin shelters is, where do we bring the animals to? And that's
Right.
that's a constant hotspot, if you will, of what we do. A lot of the shelters we work with up here in New England, in the Northeast, they have existing relationships that they developed, and when they do transport, they're full. So when we do a transport, they're full, and they need to adopt them out. And they, from time to time, they do consider new relationships, but we try to focus on the transport. We don't necessarily disclose our sources other than our website. And
I got that. Okay.
yeah, they're more than welcome to go and contact them. And that does happen from time to time. But yeah, so people reach out to us also to transport one animal they found in California to Connecticut. And obviously for something like that, you would need a jet. We also have a transport board on our website. It's a growing area of our website. It's a do-it-yourself program where people can post rescue requests and pilots. We have over 1,000 pilots in our database and drivers.
Wow.
So that's the important thing for people to realize that are listening to this. If you want to get involved, you don't need to be a pilot. You can drive. If you have a vehicle and you like to drive long distance, there's definitely a need for your help, for your services. So
at some level, and this is on the ground and the air, you're a bit of an Uber in the bigger sense of it, with a big heart on this thing for them. So are they coordinating the people you're working with? And I'm just trying to understand it, so I apologize. But
no, it's fine.
So you've got people you work with. This in my head, this is what I'm thinking, and tell me where I'm missing something. But you've got a shelter that's overflowing. They need help. They found maybe a home for these the animals that are running out of time, basically, and they say, okay, we need to get these transported from one location to the other. Is that kind of how it works?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it's about relocating the animal so they have a better chance of being adopted, so that they don't have to be unnecessarily euthanized due to lack of space.
Right.
And aviation, there's a lot of great use cases for using the plane. Puppies, kittens, senior animals, sick animals, medical cases. They may not be able to endure the stress of a long drive. We also end up being a major lifeline and give tremendous relief to these ground transports that are happening all the time.
Sure.
A lot of the groups we work with, they own vehicles. They have volunteers. They're driving the distance 24 hours often. So we give them some relief by offering up the aircraft option, or even offering up our ground transport with our crew. And then after disasters, that's another great great use of aviation. We've been doing a lot of stuff post Helene and Milton. We've made several flights down to Asheville, North Carolina, to relieve that aftermath of those hurricanes, where the animals end up getting displaced or unwanted. We've been working with the Humane Society of the United States and Bissell Pet Foundation, and there's no shortage of work that needs to be done. And everybody works hard to raise donations, and it would be unfortunate for those donations to go in some charter organization's pocket.
Right. Exactly. Well, one of the things is, and this is for the listeners as well, I was looking at some of your numbers, and they're pretty astronomical. It's actually somewhat shocking to me. And, I'm dealing with rescues all the time. I'm going to take a sidestep, and this is the way this is the ADHD in me. I go bounce all over the place, but I saw somebody on social media the other day, to all you guys getting rid of the old dogs to get the new dogs, shame on you. 'Cause I guess there's a big group of people they have older dogs, and the dogs are too old, and they take them into a rescue, and then they'll get another younger dog. I didn't even know that existed, but unfortunately, it makes some sense in some ways, and it's really a sad thing. Or do you get a lot of older dogs as well that you're moving around?
We do, and I was shocked to hear that a senior animals could be as young as 5 years old. But the thing about senior pets, and they do have I think it's 65% less chance of being adopted than a puppy. But the senior animal, you already know their temperament. They have their shots.
Right.
They're not going to eat your shoes or your jacket or your favorite bag. And you're really doing a great service to the rescue community when you adopt a senior pet. So I always encourage people to do that. I mean, being a father of four young boys, I can tell you, I would not want a puppy. It's just, I can't handle that. I would much rather have.
You got 4 young puppies already.
Exactly.
So that's pretty funny. It's funny. My daughter, on the other side of it, the hard thing is you become attached to an older dog and they're not around as long. But on the other side, what a kind thing to do, aside from rescuing a dog, but rescuing a senior dog, let's use that term. You're giving them a quality of life. And that's, to me, is just so important.
Thank you. Happy to do it.
I love what you guys are doing. So, but I want to get back to your story a little bit. So when you first started this thing, you were doing it as a side job because you were working. And now, and recently, I think when I read in COVID or whatever, this is your full-time job now?
That's right. Yeah. Being, like I've said earlier, I've been a serial entrepreneur since a young age, like 13. I've had a lot of failures and few successes. And
I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah. And this being one of the biggest successes, if not number one. I had a corporate events business that I started back in 2019, I believe, or 2019. And COVID just decimated that and never really came back from it. It was very difficult. And meanwhile, the charity was taking off. If you remember during COVID,
literally,
yeah, exactly. If you remember during COVID, there was a time where you couldn't even go across state lines without quarantining. Whereas if you have an aircraft and you do a turn in less than 24 hours, that rule didn't apply to you.
Oh, wow.
So they were enforcing it at the airports and like the train station. They weren't necessarily enforcing it with cars, but they were talking about it and people were nervous. So ground transport came to a halt, whereas our phone and emails were ringing off the hook and coming in droves. So did the donations. And if you remember during COVID, they changed some of the charitable contributions and what you could deduct on your taxes to help charities out. All those things combined, my business was decimated, and I just said to myself, okay, I've been running this organization at that time for 6 years. I think it's time to figure out a way to make a living at it. And I kicked myself off the board. I paid myself a meager salary, certainly not a livable wage in living in Brooklyn with 4 kids, but something to just put food on the table. And it really was to the benefit of the organization. There is this common misconception out there where charities should give 100% of their earnings to the mission or the cause, and nobody should pay themselves. And that's a big mistake, because how do you run an organization without paying yourself something?
Right.
And if you want to attract talented people, you need to pay them a wage that's commensurate with their skills. So I didn't get involved in this to make a lot of money. Nobody running a charity does. Everybody who works at a charity basically takes a pay cut. But I'm definitely rewarded with the feeling of fulfillment, waking up every day really excited about what I'm doing. I love this work, and I put countless hours into it. I'm very passionate, and I feel like I'm truly giving back.
Well, you are.
Yeah, when you're saving lives, we're saving these furry lives, and we also hear about the stories of all the families that these rescues. They end up saving these families.
Well, and I want to get into some of those stories, but there's some things I want to dig in a little bit more. So one is, when you're doing this stuff, and for everybody listening, let's talk a little bit about COVID. And most people know this, and not everybody does, but during COVID, it was the highest. Some of the shelters were empty because everybody was home and adopting these dogs. And that's a great story at the beginning until you hear the end, because then what happened is everybody started bringing them back when they realized they weren't really dog owners or cat owners or whatever. And they all started coming back. And even today, most shelters are overflowed because of that leftover from COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys must have been during that, especially when you started doing, I'm assuming, and tell me where I'm wrong on this, is that you guys probably ended up becoming really busy when all the dogs started coming back and they didn't have places to put these dogs. Our cats.
That's right. It was like a roller coaster, literally.
Yeah.
There were just there was so much movement with the people and pets, and people that were moving in the new facility, whether they were renting. It wouldn't allow for animals, or they couldn't afford them. And that's one of the big movements, those two things I mentioned, by the way, because everybody's like, why are they euthanizing animals? What's the solution? And two of those solutions are keeping pets in people's homes. So if it's not financially viable any longer to take care of your pet, that's something that needs to be addressed. And one of the things that's skyrocketed recently is veterinarian costs, because private equity has gotten involved and it's gotten very expensive.
Consolidation.
Yes. There are a lot of amazing groups doing things to help people keep their pets in their homes, whether it's through subsidies or providing food or whatnot, just to try to convince them, because they're the alternative. Here in New York City, you have the ACC, which is an open door shelter. And what that means is they can't refuse any pets that you drop off, but they often are euthanized. The adoption rate is not keeping up with the flow of animals coming in. And a lot of that has to do with people just simply not being able to afford the medical care or food or treatment for the animal. The other one is convincing real estate developers to allow for animals in their apartments. That's another push.
Oh, that's a different angle I never thought about. That's a great idea.
Yeah. They shy away because people do complain about noise, mainly barking.
Right.
Or, they're worried about them trashing the apartment or whatnot, but that's what security deposits are for, and we need more pet-friendly facilities. And then the vicious breeds thing is a problem. I mean, we can go on and on, but it's very difficult to get homeowners insurance or registered insurance if you have a quote unquote vicious breed, but we all know that vicious breeds are made vicious by their owners, not the animals themselves. They're not born that way. You can't, German Shepherds, Rottweiler, Pit Bulls, some of these are the most amazing dogs, but they get a bad rap. So there's some great initiatives out there. And what we do besides rescuing thousands of animals is we help create awareness through storytelling. So I'm big into marketing. I've always believed that you got to sell the sizzle, not the steak. You have to.
I like that.
Yeah, and that's coming from a vegetarian. So tofu steak. We'll call it a tofu steak. But if you don't tell people about what you're doing, like this podcast, and thank you for helping us spread the message, you'll die with your secret. So we could save animals all day long, but if we don't create content, if we don't market it or do social media and get media coverage, nobody will know about what we're doing. And it's all about to tell people about this problem we still have in this country about euthanizing nearly 1 million animals a year. We just happen to we're fortunate that we have a great platform, a great vehicle, this plane, to tell our story, and people love the experience. It's not, you don't hear about animals being saved every day flying on a plane. So we get people's attention and they get it and they want to help out. And that's the special sauce. We are able to address this issue, and by telling these stories and developing this content, by bringing along influencers or people in the news, and we get the word out there, and it ends up saving more animals than what actually goes in the plane or the ground vehicle, because people think twice now about buying an animal, and they go out to their local shelter and adopt an animal.
One of the things I thought about when we were talking about doing this episode is an awareness, because most people aren't aware about. Everybody knows that there's euthanasia in shelters, but they don't really understand how big it is. And I think it's important for people, and if you want to even talk a little bit more about it, so people understand what's going on. It's not like the shelters are trying to be bad. They just can't, they don't have the capacity. But, and all these organizations, aside from yourself, that are really trying to support it so we can save the animals that are there. And, they always say, don't buy a dog, rescue a dog,
Mhm.
and that's so important. But one other question too, and I want you to get a little bit more into euthanasia to help educate people. You were talking about the sizzle. Does tofu sizzle? I don't know if it does or doesn't. But anyways, go on.
Yeah, if you put in some hot oil, sure.
Okay, there you go. Okay. So can you educate people a little bit more about the euthanasia, and then let's dig in, because I've got a bunch of questions about flying the pets and all that, about how that's coordinating that. But
Sure.
let's go talk a little bit more so we can educate everybody that's listening.
Sure. Number one reason animals are euthanized today is due to overcrowding or lack of space. A lot of these municipally run shelters, they have a budget, they have a facility, and their marching orders are that if an animal's not adopted or they're unclaimed, they have to euthanize to make space. These are largely not adoptable animals, so they may have a medical case, they may be vicious. And that may not be it may not be the animal's fault that they're vicious. They could have been abused, neglected,
Right.
chained up to a fence, emaciated. I mean, these are horrible stories. We've all seen the commercials. We don't focus on that. We focus on the positive story of adoption. But these are the type of animals that are typically being euthanized. Unfortunately, a lot of great pets, also potential pets, also end up being euthanized, and that's the disheartening. That's really that hurts when a perfectly viable dog or cat ends up getting euthanized just because nobody is opening up their home to adopt the animal, or they purchased an animal instead of opening their home for a rescue animal. So these are largely down south. The biggest offenders in the states that we visit the most are the Carolinas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Florida. And then if you start going out, Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, California has a problem. But these are all states that they have a huge overcrowding of animals in their
And
shelters.
why do you think that is? Is it based on education, or what? Based on your experience and your thoughts, why do you think that is in the South?
I think it may be due to budgetary constraints. It could be partial,
Economic?
yeah, economic, political. Money and politics almost is always high on the list.
Yep.
There are a lot of poor rural areas outside the city, where there's a lot of backyard breeders, hoarders.
Mhm.
There are cases where people do have huge hearts and they really want to help. They start putting out food for stray cats, and then one cat turns into 10 cats, turns into 100 cats, and they really have a good huge heart, but they get into a situation where they can no longer take care of 100 cats, and there's sanitary considerations. It's not just dangerous for the people, it's dangerous for the cats themselves. They don't have the facility and the means
Sure.
to take care of 100 cats, even though they think they're doing a good deed. And I hate to say it, in certain cases, you're better off putting the animal down than trying to keep it alive, because it may be so sick or require so much care that it's going to use all the resources, all the money.
Right.
I hear about this all the time. Um, sometimes shelters will pay $1,500 to an animal sanctuary to take the animal for the rest of its life, rather than keeping it in the shelter for years upon years, because it costs more money than to year after year to take care of an animal than
Sure.
uh, you know. So that's a more viable way, if the shelter can afford it, is to pay a sanctuary. It's expensive to care for an animal. I mean, I have a 90-pound shepherd. It costs me over $100 a month just for food,
Right.
and that's not even the special food that a lot of people pay. And then you have veterinarian care. I mean, it's expensive. Not everybody has the means to do that. Imagine 100 cats. So that's just one example of a backyard breeder. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it comes down to money, politics, a general consent, feeling about adoption, and I don't know. I don't really have good answers for you, but I think it's just a money and politics thing.
I think part of it, there's spay and neuter, and that comes to money too. And there's a lot of spay and neuter areas that are free, but in rural areas, I think part of it's education and just the way they were growing up too, and they just don't realize it. Because if you're, I'll tell you, I had a rescue group out of Mexico, and they had a big, and down by Cabo, and they had a huge stray dog population issue, and so they spay and neuter all these dogs. Next thing they know, they now have a cat problem because the stray dogs they're not as plentiful, And now the cats are there, and now all the cats are coming out because they're not getting chased by the dogs. And then they had to go back and do, one problem created, and one fix became another problem in a different area. It's kind of funny, but I would bet you like your 100 cat story, there's spay and neuter. You don't have to have 100 cats. Maybe you have 10 cats at that point. One of those things.
Yeah, you're right. And the lack of spaying and neutering. I also think because the climate it typically is more mild, they have more stray animals outdoors. I don't see. I've visited other countries where stray animals are just amongst the people. Like it's not uncommon.
Yeah.
They're basic. And I asked people about it. I went to India, I went to Turkey, and went to Israel, and I see all these animals just going around in the street.
Yeah, they're neighbors.
They're neighbors, and basically, people just in general say, yeah, it's just a common. Everyday occurrence to see dogs and cats walking the street, and they basically said that they're left alone unless they're vicious. They don't recommend interacting with them or feeding them.
Right.
And I don't see anything wrong with that. Here in Brooklyn, we see a ton of stray cats. I don't see the need to round them up and euthanize them. I don't think animal control, that's really what the purpose they're serving is. They're more there because they get a report about a vicious animal or a hoarding situation where people, it's unclean. And you hear that quite a bit, but.
Well, two things. One is I had an episode in this woman in Second Aruba, and what she does, because they have a gazillion wild dogs there, and a lot of the dogs are in family houses that really don't know how to take care of dogs. So what they do, it's education. They teach them how to treat these dogs and what to do it, and they end up keeping the dogs and they don't become strays. That's one thing. The other one is I had another episode and it's a really amazing, you can do some research on it and do it because you'd probably find it fascinating. It's called the Free Ranging Dog Project. And there's a place in Morocco where these dogs are just, like you said, they just live day to day. There's no owners, and they're studying that to see, one is how are they compared to domestic animals? And two is, what's their quality of life? Now, one of the things they found is they don't live as long because they're not taken care of, and things happen. But there's that question. We have our dogs. I'm sure you're the same. You've got a backyard, they're fenced in. But what about if I could just be a dog, go to the beach and hang out, and just do my thing, and not have to go anywhere? I don't have any rules, so I don't know what's better, one or the other. But I thought it was kind of interesting. That it's a real interesting thought process.
Absolutely, yeah. And the good news is these numbers are improving.
Yeah, of course.
And there's so much awareness. That's what we do. We help create awareness. That's what we're here for. We're just scratching the surface when it comes to numbers. We could have a fleet of 100 aircraft. It wouldn't really move the needle. It's more about creating awareness. That's the point I was trying to drive before.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a huge need for people and organizations doing things that you do.
And we'll be right back. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
Now, let's get back to you. So one of the questions I was thinking about, and I want to in a minute get into the numbers of your missions and how many animals you saved or moved and all that.
Sure.
But when you're flying in these smaller, I know you've got that Kodiak, which is a bigger plane, but are they all crated? Do you have to have them crated in there? So do you come down with crates, or do you get crates? How does that work?
A combination of both. So yes, whenever possible, we want to crate the animal. It's safer for them. It's safer for us.
Well, flying, I know. I kept thinking about what's that like.
we have tethered animals before. That becomes that becomes useful when the animal is over 80 pounds. I mean, the crate would just be mammoth. I mean, we have
Yeah.
So But we always have someone in the back when we tether. You have to, because one of those crates could get loose and fall on the animal. The animal could get loose. You need someone back there, and we always address the temperament of the animal. A lot of times, the larger the animal, the more the gentle giant they are. I don't know if you know that.
Right.
Like Great Danes are a perfect example of that. They're so aloof. So, but whenever possible, we use crates. It could be our crates, or it could be the shelter's crates. We have a cleaning protocol in place. We use a vet approved solution. We don't want any. We've never had an animal perish in our care. I mean, they're only with us for a few hours, but we want to make sure. So cleaning protocols are really important.
Right.
And yeah, so they mostly go to sleep, by the way. That's what people ask. What happens? I mean, the loading is the most stressful part. They have never been in a plane before.
Right.
But once we start up the engine, all that noise and vibration,
The
and
humming, yeah.
yeah, and also we're flying unpressurized planes, so our ceiling is 8,000 feet, just like a commercial plane is pressurized at 8,000 feet. And we can't go above that because they'll become hypoxic. So there's not enough oxygen. They'll start having trouble breathing. So the animals is about 8,000 feet. Humans tend to have trouble around 12,000 feet.
So that's what I was going to ask you. I thought that it was 12,000 for animals. It's 8,000. I didn't know that.
8,000. Yeah, I've actually witnessed this in real time.
Wow.
Because when you're coming from down south, air traffic control wants you at 7,000 or 9,000 feet.
Right.
And they ask if we could take 9,000 feet. We say unable. But earlier on, I did try to take 9,000, and someone was in the back, and they made a comment that it looked like the animal was having trouble breathing. So you do need to be careful. But yeah, so 8,000 feet is the ceiling there.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. And plus, you're only on the East Coast, right?
Yes, I mean we do some stuff sort of Midwest, Southwest. We were in Louisiana not too long ago. And we also do more than dogs and cats, by the way. We did 33 endangered sea turtles from the New England Aquarium.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. We also do wolves. Red wolves are critically endangered. There's like 10 known collared red wolves in the wild. Think about that for a second. Those are the only ones we know about. There are very few left.
Right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and where would the domesticated dog be without the wolf, right? So I love doing the endangered species work because we have a direct connection, a direct hand in helping that species proliferate.
Yeah, sure.
And what a lot of people don't realize is we're all connected. If the wolf goes away, then another species is going to come up, is going to rise up and cause some problems. So
you're preaching to the choir. You need to go back and listen to some of my episodes. I did one with the wolf sanctuary, and and you're absolutely right. There's that balance in nature. When as American humans, anytime there's a problem with animals, generally it's human related. But when Yellowstone was doing the deal and they're hunting all the wolves, the whole balance went off, and now they can't hunt wolves, and the nature's come back, and it's better than it was. It's the same thing with all these things. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So one other thing I want you to talk about and get a little bit more into it, because it's really, really important. And you mentioned, North Carolina with the recent disasters. Talk about disasters and displaced animals and how that affects how many dogs are in rescue places because of displaced animals, and why you guys have to move them, because that's an important thing for people to understand.
Yeah, so disaster response is something we're looking to do more of in the future. It's probably number one best use case for an aircraft, because a lot of the roads are not passable right after these disasters, and the airports are some of the first things to open up.
Right.
So we also get the opportunity to bring in supplies, whether it be for people or pets, because a lot of the times we're going down south empty. There's nothing in the cabin of the plane.
Right.
So it's really rewarding and a great efficient use of donor dollars helping out after disasters. These shelters were reeling even before the disaster. So if you talk about an area like Asheville, they already had an overcrowded pet population and were already euthanized, and now all of a sudden they have to deal with these floods. And they don't have anywhere to bring the animals to that are in this shelter.
Right.
And then you have a lot of, unfortunately, pets are part of the family. Anybody knows that. But a lot of times these people, they got to get out of Dodge, and they can't find their pet.
Right.
Or the pet, and it just gets lost. It gets carried downstream. It hides because it's scared.
Right.
And we do, there's great organizations that do everything they can to reconnect them. Obviously, they hopefully they're microchipped and stuff like that. But if you lose your home and you have no money, you're in maybe you're just outside of Asheville, it's more rural or a poor area or whatnot.
Right.
You may not be thinking about, oh, I need to find my pet. You might be thinking about, what am I going to do now? I just lost my trailer home, or I lost all my possessions. I can't find my animal. I need to leave. So there's a lot of that stuff happening. But more importantly, the shelters just were reeling from that disaster and needed to get as many animals out because their facility was no longer viable. It's flooded. So they need to get back to square one so they can take this massive intake of animals that's going to be coming their way. Whether these massive intake of animals get claimed or not, that remains to be seen. I mean, all the animals that we transported out there were unclaimed, unwanted pets.
Wow.
So, and then we're still doing that work. I mean, Asheville just got water turned back on. What are we? It's tomorrow's Christmas. I think they just got water turned on like a few weeks ago.
And that was what, 3 months ago, 4 months ago?
Yeah, sounds about right. Hurricane.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
So do, like, on some of these, the dogs are cats. I always say that, but they get displaced, and maybe the owners are still looking for them. Do they go to some of these places temporarily, and they're just like a holding area until maybe the owners can find them or they can get them back? Or is it mainly they're now going to another shelter to find a new home?
Well, there is a waiting period. I mean, that there was a big controversy going on after these disasters, is animals being taken from their rightful owners and then adopted out.
Right.
But I think a lot of rescues are sensitive to that, to make sure that doesn't happen. I mean, if your animal's microchipped, that's the best thing because they're scanned. So there's no dispute who that owner is when they scan it. But if it's not microchipped, it makes it a little bit harder, because if they have no identification, no tag, you have to. It's incumbent on the previous owner to determine, to show proof. I didn't really follow any of those cases. I don't think it's done maliciously.
No, I don't think so either.
I think people change their mind.
Well,
I really do. And we've gotten these calls before, where we've transported an animal, it gets adopted out, and they contact us and they're like, I want my dog back. I want my cat back. And then we do a little bit of digging. We find out that wasn't the case previously. They either gave it up, they didn't claim it, and now all of a sudden things have changed in their life and they want their pet back. So it's convenient for them to think about it now, but if they have a history of not taking care of their pet and abandoning, then I'm not so sure they're really going to be the best owner for them now. So it's stuff to think about.
So do they have things like, when there's a disaster, sometimes you can go find lists for people that are missing. They could be in a hospital or something like that. Do they have, after like that thing, do they have like a list of animals that have been moved or anything? Is there like a helpline that somebody can call and say, I'm missing Fido and he looks like this and all that, or a website, or is there anything like that? Or is it just they got to do the search and find it?
There are databases that allow you to found lost and found pets. Like Petco has something called Love Lost. Pet Finder, it's mainly used for adoptions, but some shelters list lost and found pets. There's microchip registries that have a lost pet recovery database, like Home Again. Then the local humane societies and shelters get involved. Social media. So there is a pretty big effort on multiple resources to try to reconnect lost pets with their owner.
So let's talk about your numbers. I've got it written down, but let's talk about your numbers, because you guys have been around for roughly 10 years. If you don't have it in front of you, I have the numbers written down, but because I got it from your website. But let's talk about miles, missions, and total animals you've been able to move since you started, because they're big numbers.
Yeah, since 2015, we've done nearly 300 missions, flown nearly 300,000 miles, and we're about 3,500 animals.
Crazy.
Yeah, and those numbers will grow exponentially as we expand our fleet. We're halfway there to purchase another Kodiak. Next year we're going to be buying another Sprinter van for ground transport. So we're scaling. We're scaling as quickly as we can.
So the way when I was looking at numbers, it looks like it's averaging that you're doing right now roughly a mission a week, basically.
Yes, there's no shortage of rescue work that you could do. And sometimes it's more than once a week, but I would say on average it's once a week.
And then I saw like the month of December this year, you've already done 4 or 5 or 6 or something already.
Yeah, well, we put the aircraft into operation in October, so obviously we've been putting it to use, and she's been proving herself very reliable as opposed to a previous aircraft. She, just start up the engine and you go. There's very few issues, and it's so robust and reliable. It makes us want to do more and more. And the ground transport is also extremely reliable.
I'll bet that's growing really fast as well.
It is.
One thing I was thinking about when I was thinking about all these miles, but you were talking about 8,000 ceiling. So you guys, especially on the East Coast, you're in weather all the time too. So it's kind of sketchy sometimes too. I've got to believe, right?
Yeah, I mean, the plane is certified to go into known icing, but it could become sticky. I mean, we did a rescue into Buffalo. We got in, but we couldn't get out, and that's common. But yeah, what you're alluding to is we can go on oxygen and get above the weather. The plane has a 25,000 foot ceiling. It's not really a good performer up there. It's
of course it's slow and burns more fuel.
Yeah, the engine it's an agricultural variant. It's a Pratt and Whitney engine, but it's the same engine they put in a Sky Tractor, so it's meant to operate down low. Its sweet spot's like 10 to 12,000 feet.
Right.
Normal turboprops, you want to get up high as quickly as possible. But to your point, we can't put every animal on oxygen. I mean, they do make oxygen masks for dogs and cats, but you have to practice at home. Can you imagine putting that on?
No, not my dog. Not happening. Not happening to my dog.
In the Northeast during the winter, hanging out at altitudes of, let's say 6,000 to 8,000 feet, sometimes you could find yourself in weather. So we have to do some weather planning. I mean, the good news is that even though these are mission critical type missions, there's some flexibility. So we always tell the people we're working with, we may need to pick another date, at least a day or two, if there's going to be weather, and they're usually flexible. These are not like 24-hour death row situations.
So one last question, and if there's anything else we didn't cover, please do. But as you're growing, are you going to find that you're going to be growing just staying mainly on the East Coast? I know you've gone as far as Texas and all that, or whatever, or Louisiana. But as you grow, is there such a need that you only really need to be on the East Coast for the most part?
No, the need is nationwide. Absolutely. I mean, our intention is to grow the fleet of aircraft and ground vehicles so that we can provide a reliable transportation option for a lot of these amazing organizations that I mentioned, like Humane Society,
Right.
Pet Foundation. That's not their business. They're in the business of coordinating rescue efforts, but if they have a transportation partner like us that's free of charge because we're donation driven, that's going to be their go-to. We love working with them. They love working with us. So, hopefully we can have a fleet of aircraft. Let's say we could probably do it with five planes, and the ground transport vehicles go along with that, so that we can provide this reliable transport. And that would be the dream, and we'll get there.
So if you had 5 planes, would you have them being based in different areas then? Is that what you would do?
Yes.
Okay.
And out west, we may need a pressurized aircraft. I know there's another organization that runs a couple caravans, and they have problems getting over the Rockies, for example.
Right. Yeah.
So out there, we may need to deal with that. But I wish aviation was not so expensive.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
People listening to this may not understand. I mean, the plane we got, the Kodiak, is used, and it was $2 million, and the insurance is $65,000 a year, and
you got to do annuals all the time and all that other stuff too.
Yeah, it's $15,000 to start on the annual. We're burning 50 gallons of jet fuel, averaging let's say 6.
And what is jet fuel now? What's the cost per gallon?
I would say you'll find it anywhere from like $4 to $8. Call it $6 a gallon. We're burning 50 gallons an hour, so that's $300 an hour just in fuel.
Yeah, that's crazy. And so I know you're paid, or most of your pilots volunteers and doing it on themselves, or
all of them. We don't pay any pilots. No.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Yeah, it's a win-win. I mean, the FAA, we're designated what's called a Part 91 organization, so we can't we can't get paid to fly. We're not charter.
Right.
No, we can't transport any animals or people or goods for payment. So, but all our volunteer pilots they all fly for the airlines or they fly for a charter organization. And I ask them all the time, why would you want to fly these missions on your days off? You're in one of these planes all the time. And they told me because it lights them up.
Sure.
It gives them a feeling of fulfillment.
They're giving something back.
Yeah, and they get to connect with general aviation. I mean, a couple of our pilots fly for these regional airlines. One flies for a charter organization, and I hate to say it, but sometimes people just suck. It's like,
well, people do suck.
Yeah.
I don't hate to say it; it's true.
Yeah, and travelers are so demanding today.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily their fault. I mean, commercial aviation it's probably one of the top 10 things people loathe is to go to the airport and fly somewhere. I mean, look how inconvenient it is today between the security line, the overpriced crappy food, being packed in a plane like a sardine. It's lost its luster.
Right.
It's not a glamorous experience that it used to be. But so for a lot of these pilots, I think they love to reconnect with general aviation.
Well, they're small. They're flying a smaller plane too, which is more fun. You're really flying too.
Exactly. And there's no security checks, and they're not dealing with people. So
well, and I would think too, there's some guys that volunteer just to build some hours too to get a bigger job with the bigger airlines. The more hours you have, obviously, that makes you more valuable to the airlines as well.
They do need 1,500 hours to get their airline transport pilot license, ATP license. So there is some of that happening. We work with a bunch of pilots from a flight school that gets them ready to go to the airlines. So they need those hours. And they much prefer doing it than it's a real mission, because you could be a flight instructor and all you do is take off and land, go to the practice area, do maneuvers, working with your students so they can get their license. You never actually file a flight plan and fly to point A to B with a load of animals. It's a real mission, and it's a very rewarding mission at that. So they love to do it.
Okay, so last thing, is there anything we missed that you want to make sure that you get out there for everybody? We'll get to your guys' contact information, but anything that we didn't talk about, anything you want to get out there, information on what you guys are doing that we haven't covered?
Our website is pilotstotherescue.org. You can go there, you can make a donation, you can volunteer, you can share our stories on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, Threads. And I would encourage people that are listening to give back. Pick something you're passionate about, actually roll up your sleeves and physically get involved. We all need money as a charity. I'm not going to lie. It's never enough money. And I appreciate donations. I really do. But go to your local shelter and give these pets some of your love. I mean, even if it's temporary, you can check out a dog and take it on a walk, whether you adopt it or not. And it's a very rewarding experience. When you get back physically, watch what happens in your life. I have countless blessings and miracles in my life because of this work that I do. And the only thing I can attribute it to is saving all these lives. That's it. I mean, when you get back, it comes back to you tenfold. And I know we hear that all the time, and people,
but it's true.
It's so true. It's so
Absolutely,
true.
100% true. Giving, I always tell people, whatever you give, you get a lot more back than what you give. Always, always do.
And it's more meaningful than buying a new car or a new pair of shoes. Those are fleeting moments, let me tell you.
Right.
So
we're on the same page there. So the last thing I wanted to do is, as everybody that's listening, it's heard my episodes, is our animal joke. And luckily today, for you guys listening, because I know you're cringing, Michael's got a good joke for us today. You don't have to hear me telling one. So Michael, what's your joke of the day?
What do rescue pets and pilots have in common?
Ooh, this is a good one. What do rescue pets and pilots have in common? I don't know what.
A little turbulence never brings them down.
Oh, I love that one. That's a good one. It's funny. I was I was looking for one for pilots and dogs, and I couldn't find one. So I'm glad you've got one. That's a great one.
Yeah.
Super.
It's cute. It's family friendly.
Okay. So anyways, for everybody that's out there listening, as I always say, if you want your kids, your grandkids, your niece, nephews, or whatever to tell a joke on the show, I'm always looking for that. And also for you guys that may have a great story like Michael's here or whatever, email me directly, mkyle@forrealpodcast.com. I'll get back to everybody. I do it all the time. I'll gladly bring your kids on because you don't want to hear me tell any more jokes anyways. And I would really appreciate it. And of course, keep following, listening. Make sure people, if you're listening, hear about Michael's story, get them to listen to the episode and all that. But first off, Michael, thanks so much for being on. I so appreciate it. I really do. And you taking the time, and I think you're doing great things.
Happy to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me on. Thank you to your listeners, and happy holidays to you and your loved ones.
Well, thank you so much. And then for everybody else that's out there listening, from me, from the bottom of my heart, thanks so much for listening. Keep following and passing the word for real.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.
Hey, music fans, there are some great concerts headed this way. Don't miss out on all the shows in your favorite venues like Deftones at Madison Square Garden, Eagles at the Sphere, and Foster the People at the Ryman Auditorium. Tickets are going fast, so don't wait. Head to LiveNation.com to get your tickets now. That's LiveNation.com.